Hello. Today I've been frustrated working on recording this video for you. And this is, I don't know how many times I've done it. The microphone wasn't the right microphone the first time I tried to do it. And it took me a while to figure that out. So anyway, thank you. And I'm glad you're here. So today I'm going to talk about uh, getting started in public speaking. As you can see here, this is technically lecture number 2. And I'm beginning with Lisa Simpson here. I like Lisa Simpson. She's a great character. I'd like to live next door to the Simpsons, maybe, some of the times. But it's a great series, and Lisa has always been portrayed as the well-spoken member of that family. So I'm going to try to help you uh, be well spoken just as Lisa Simpson is. All right, I'm going to begin with my rules of public speaking. Now, this particular lecture kind of takes bits and pieces of what would normally be from uh, different chapters. Normally, well, I'm not even going to say normally, I shouldn't say that. My lectures don't always completely align with the chapters. So you need to listen to my lectures, take notes, or however you like to work, because what I say in my lectures are obviously what I feel is particularly important on this particular topic. And so it doesn't always follow exactly what's in the book. Starting next week, I will have some chapters for you to read and so on. This is kind of chapter 1, part of chapter 3, and that sort of thing. There's things in chapter 1 that I'm not covering in this lecture. Anyway, enough said about that. But you won't find these rules in any of the chapters. And you can look through the whole book and you're not going to find my rules of public speaking. But you need to know them. It's my class, isn't it? And yes, they will appear on the tests. And I use the plural because I think these 3 rules, very simple little rules, will do more for you, not only if you ever actually have to give a speech, but in everyday communication. So let me go over them. First of all, never apologize, never assume anything, and slow down. All right, never apologize. And next to that, you see it says be a leader. And you might not think of giving a speech as some kind of leadership role, but indeed it is. When you get up in front of a group of people, just like any teacher does, you are in charge. You're the leader. And we all feel this way. When somebody gets up and starts saying, I'm sorry for this, or this isn't right, or whatever, it's kind of, I'm laughing because my Scottish Terrier just barged into the room. Hold on 1 second. Don't go away. Hello, Maisie. Did you come to see what I'm up to? Okay, let me close the door a little bit. All right. So, yeah, there she is. She's my big Scotty dog. One of these days, I'll try holding her up so you can see her. She does feature in one of my lectures, by the way. So, never apologizing. It means uh, being confident, showing confidence. And I mean, how can you convince people of your point of view, for example, if you don't feel confident in and of yourself? What form do these apologies take, perhaps? Well, one example is, well, I don't feel very well, but today's my day to get up and give a speech. Or at work, I'm not really quite sure why I was asked to give this presentation. Oh my God, that's a terrible thing to say when you get up. I mean, either you know or you don't know. And if you don't know, find out before you stand up to speak. So never apologize. I'm going to send you a link to a little YouTube video. It's 3.5 minutes long, of a prominent young actress who stands up to and accept an award and apologizes out the wazoo. But I'll send it to you. You can watch it. Okay, never assume anything. All right, And next to this, you see, know your audience. You need to know who you're talking to. Why? Because a diverse group of people, and this can, again, I keep going back to, this can be at work too, but a diverse group of people, and you're talking to them, you can't assume that they all come to the table with the same background information or the same cultural background, the same age, whatever it might be. You need to know who you're talking to and how to tailor your presentation so that they're going to really understand it. Here's an example. Good afternoon, my name is Ray, and today I'm going to give a speech about the FBI. Now, most of you are probably thinking that the FBI is the Federal Bureau of Investigation. No, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the Farm Bureau of Iowa. I had a student once who gave a speech on artificial intelligence. And never once in the speech did he say artificial intelligence. He just kept saying AI. Well, that works. In that case, I think most people figured it out. But you can't assume people will figure it out. So be very careful and make sure that you clarify what you're talking about. I'll mention that again in a moment. Now, I've had a few emails from some of you indicating that you do indeed suffer from speech anxiety, fear of public speaking. And in fact, my next lecture is going to be about that exactly. And so I'll go into it in more depth and some techniques you can use to try to overcome this anxiety about getting up and talking. One of the best things you can do when you get up to talk in any situation, slow down. Because, of course, when we get nervous, we tend to talk faster. You have to consciously remind yourself to slow down. I'm doing that right now. I'm speaking more slowly than I would in a conversation. I want to make sure all of you understand what I'm saying and that I'm listening to myself as well as I'm speaking slowly. I have coached a number of people over the years in broadcast and other related areas, and I have a little mantra, and I tell people, if you think you're speaking slowly enough, slow down just a little bit more, and you should be good. So these are my 3 rules. Don't forget them. Never apologize, never assume anything, and slow down. You will see these over and over during the semester. Now then, another point here, and I relate this to leadership. Target time. When you give a speech, typically you're given a certain amount of time to do the speech in. I'm sure you've all been to presentations where the speaker just goes on and on and on, and you just want to kind of slide under the table because they won't stop. That's terrible. That's poor leadership as far as I'm concerned. If you're asked to give a presentation at work, at church, whatever it might be, and you're asked, well, can you talk for about 10 minutes? Well, then don't talk for 20 minutes. Talk for 10 minutes. All right. Now, in most of the public speaking classes, of course, not doing it online, you can have a clock and you can watch yourself. But typically instructors will have little signs that they hold up when you get, let's say it's a 5-minute speech. When they get to 4 minutes, the instructor holds up a sign and says you have 1 minute left. And then another sign, you have 30 seconds left. And many instructors will then hold up a stop sign and you're done, you're cut off. All right. I never done that. I want people to finish their speech. But if the presentation requires a specific amount of time, whatever it might be, we'll just say 10 minutes, and you go over that target time, then of course you'll lose some points for the presentation. Good example, the first presentation that I'm asking you to give will be between 2 and 3 minutes long. Oh, wait a minute. Does the target time work in the other direction? So the dramatic reading, that's our first presentation, 2 to 3 minutes long. What if you get up and you talk for 45 minutes? Or excuse me, 45 seconds. Yeah, 45 minutes. Did you meet the target time if you speak for 45 seconds? No. So you didn't meet it on that end either. If you get into that 2 to 3 minute range, then you've done your job. You've met the target time. Once again, as we get closer to the first presentation, I'll review this some more and clarify it and talk about it. All right, public speaking versus conversation. What do I have here? Let's see. It says public speaking. It's highly structured, whereas conversation is informal. This is one of those duh statements. Of course, we know that's exactly the difference. Now, what I mean by highly structured is that with a speech, of course, you've figured out ahead of time what you're going to say and in what order you're going to say it. That's the structure. Of course, there's more to it than that, but that's the basic. I mean, if you remember that, you're doing great. Whereas in formal conversation, you get together with a group of friends. Now, how many times before you get together, you get out some 3x5 cards and write down all your notes to make sure you tell everybody what it is that you had on your agenda for your gathering? I don't think so. We don't do it that way. So structure versus informality. All right, formal language. Public speaking uses formal language. I'm doing that now. I'm trying to speak in complete sentences. I'm avoiding using slang and other kinds of informal speech. And that's all I mean by uh, formal versus informal. You know, if you have a proclivity for grandiloquentious confabulation, in other words, if you like big words, that can be okay if you know your audience. But typically, you want to keep your language structure at a level where people listening are comfortable. Remember, you don't always know the common backgrounds, the commonalities of your audience. So using good language, good structure is very important in a formalized presentation. Under interpersonal speaking conversation, I have slang, for example, and I will talk about slang, idioms, euphemisms, all these wonderful parts of speech that can really actually make a speech interesting if used in the right way. So, public speaking, there's different methods. In fact, there's 4 of them. I'll try to hold my hand up here. There's 4 of them. There's the it's known as the manuscript method, where you write everything down word for word. And sometimes the speech calls for that. And then you just read it. Memorization, something you will not do in this class, but actually memorize a speech word for word. And then there's the impromptu kind of speech where it's just off the top of your head. Those don't always work real well. And then something called the brain dead moment, the kind of off the cuff but still structured sort of presentation. Once again, I keep telling you I will come back to all of these. I will, but there are 4 methods. How many methods are there for informal conversation? I'd say 1, the informal method. All right. And then down at the bottom of the slide, I mentioned in the informal speaking, we tend to use a lot of what I call filler words, like, actually, you know, casual posture. So this is something we want to try to avoid in a formalized presentation. Okay, some similarities. All right, organizing your thoughts logically. You know, I've already told one joke. I'm going to be telling more. Don't worry. There'll be more jokes to come. But even telling a joke requires that you think logically. My poor wife has a real hard time. She likes jokes and she'll hear a joke, but she forgets the punchline a lot of times. And it's all about that delivery, isn't it? So getting your thoughts organized in your head so that you can logically present them is a big deal. That's true in conversation as much as it is in giving a presentation. Uh, Knowing your audience, tailoring your message to the audience. How do you do that? I mean, how do you know anything about your audience? Well, you guys are my audience right now, and I know something about you. Well, first of all, I know approximately what age range I'm dealing with. Now, this is CSN, and of course, we have people coming back as returning students. I've had people almost as old as myself take my classes, and that's pretty old, isn't it? But anyway, I like my old jokes. But anyway, uh, most of you in this class probably fall in an age range from about 17 to somewhere in your 20s. Okay, obviously there's 30s and 40s and so on, but that doesn't represent the bulk of the class. So, okay, I've got a generalization about that. I know that people this age group listen to certain kinds of music, like certain types of movies, and so on. So again, it helps me get a general idea of knowing my audience. You're all college students, so you're all broke. Yes, yeah, okay. I was a college student once for too many years, and I was broke the whole time. So, yeah, you can gauge your audience depending on the situation. If you're giving a presentation, an informational presentation at work, you know your audience probably. They're your coworkers. So you have shared experiences that you can draw on. All right. Storytelling. Oh my gosh. Storytelling, as far as I'm concerned, is the key to successful communication. We as humans identify with stories. It's the way we empathize. It's the way we identify with the topic at hand, whatever it might be. If you've watched any of the Democratic or Republican convention, the speakers use a lot of stories. And I would say at the heart, and I want you to remember this because it's not in the book either, but at the heart of every speech, no matter what kind of speech it is storytelling. So storytelling is incredibly important. If you can weave a story into your presentation, you'll get your audience's attention. And then feedback, audience feedback. Now, when you're giving a speech, typically, I have verbal here, typically you don't get verbal feedback. It depends on the culture, doesn't it? The household I grew up in, people were giving a lot of verbal feedback even when you were talking. It's a cultural thing. If you've ever seen any videos of the English Parliament, the Prime Minister might be up there giving a speech, and you'll hear people saying, "Oh, righto, oh, sit down," and they're very verbal in their feedback. Here in this country, we tend to be very polite in that one, but what about the physical, the facial? And the body language. If you're giving a speech and you look out, this is certainly true when I teach class, and you look out and you see a lot of bored faces, you need to up the game, don't you? You need to try to make things more interesting. If someone's dozing in the background, in the back of the room or something, obviously you're not reaching that person. Body language is interesting too. Um, and just on a one-on-one basis, as an example, if you're talking to someone and they're sitting there or standing there looking like this with their arms crossed, what does that tell you about the listener in this particular case? Well, it tells you that they've closed themselves off. They might not want to hear, appreciate, or care about what you're talking about. If you see that kind of body language, you know you have to find a way to overcome it. If the person you're talking to is doing this sort of thing, and looking at you and concentrating, you're getting a nonverbal feedback that they're really interested in what you're talking about. So, and as I say, this applies to all kinds of communication, not just speeches. All right, so what do I have next? All right, critical thinking on the part of the speaker, at least to begin with here. Focused, organized. In other words, it goes back to the structure. You will need to make sure that you are well organized. As I said in another video, I'm going to give you some basic speaker outlines that you can use to help get yourself organized. But what about what you put into the speech? Are you presenting sound information? Is it fact versus opinion? For example, the speed of light is 186,000 miles per second. That's a well-established scientific fact. Okay. I like drinking milk, and I think milk is good for you. Now, is that a fact or an opinion? Well, I think it's an opinion. Now, if I want to say, I drink a lot of milk, and I think milk is good for you. And the reason I say that is I've looked at studies from the FDA, the Dairy Association, and various other organizations that seem to support this. Oh, okay. So I've moved on from just simply my opinion to expressing the idea that there's others who support what I think as well. This will come with the other speeches, and again, I'll be showing you how to do that. So what do you need to know? Well, there's more important things when you're talking to people. Respect, honesty, clarity. These are all issues in public speaking. Let's take a quick look here. Okay, respect. Respect with your colleagues, respect with your peers, your friends, and respecting your audience, the way you address them and so on. Depends on, again, a lot of it depends on the audience that you have. I have your, are you speaking to an organization that you belong to, giving a speech at work and so on, co-workers meeting, but they need to know that you respect them and that it's just not you wanting them to respect you as the speaker. And this is extremely important if you're giving a persuasive presentation, that the listeners really feel that you respect their opinion and their knowledge, but that you hope that they will listen to you as well. And part of this, and this has become more and more important over the last few years, is cultural and gender awareness. Okay. And here's an example that I always like using. I like Star Trek. Now, I'm not a Trekkie. I don't have a Star Trek outfit hanging in the closet anywhere, but I've always enjoyed the shows and the movies. And here I get to say it again. I'm so old. I saw Star Trek when it first premiered. All right. And every show began the same way. It was the Starship Enterprise, and whoosh, it went flying through space, and the narrator came on and said, "These are the voyages of the Starship Enterprise, going boldly where no man has gone before." Do, 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 do. Oh, it was cool. It was a space race. It was a great time. But the original Star Trek only lasted 3 seasons, and then it kind of went away. And then in 1981, Star Trek: The Next Generation premieres. Jean-Luc Picard and the crew are there, once again exploring space. And the show started the same way. And the Starship Enterprise goes whoosh through space. And the music, do 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 do. And the narrator comes on and says, "These are the voyages of the Starship Enterprise, going boldly where no one has gone before." And I said, "What? They got it. No one." The original, remember, where no man has gone before? Even as a kid, I realized, there's men and women on this starship going through space. So why is it just the men who's boldly going? They got it right. This is an example of, in this case, gender awareness, inclusiveness. Right? When you're giving a speech, you need to think about these things. How are you addressing your audience? Are you being inclusive and sensitive to the audience to which you're speaking? And once again, if you do this, you'll connect with your audience. It really is very, very important. And that was the why on my slide. Now, sometimes the utter lack of cultural awareness leads to something known as ethnocentrism. Man, I don't even like to put a picture of this guy up, but it represents what I'm talking about. In the worst possible case, time for a sip of water. By the way, public speakers are allowed to do that. In the worst possible case, the lack of cultural diversity leads to ethnocentrism. Ethnocentrism is where a speaker gets up and presents their ideas, their beliefs, their culture, their race as the best, the most important, the right ones. And there is no other way to think about it. And the Nazis in this particular case that I'm talking about were the absolute worst example, where they not only said they were the superior race, but they wanted to eliminate anybody who didn't fall into that category. And of course, ethnocentrism leads to hate speech, something unfortunately that in the last few years has been on the rise again. I find that extremely disturbing. So being culturally aware, being inclusive, you can help avoid being ethnocentric. And all the years that I've been teaching this class, I can't say that I ever had anyone get up and give what I consider an ethnocentric presentation. It's always been well balanced, but of course, that isn't the case in the real world, is it? And if nothing else, just being able to recognize this ethnocentric kind of speech is worth knowing about. But it's not just the speaker. There can be ethnocentrism on the part of the listener as well. If a listener has already made up their minds about a topic, about a subject, about an issue, that they're just not going to listen to other ideas and other points of view, then they've become ethnocentric in their listening. And there's an old idiom that's down at the bottom of the slide here. It says preaching to the choir. And if you've never heard that, what that means is that, if you go to church and the minister's standing up there and he says, sin is bad, and everybody says, amen. Well, everyone that came to church probably already thought sin was bad, didn't they? Preaching to the choir. And that in itself is kind of an ethnocentrism where you only are telling, as the speaker, only telling people what it is they want to hear. So these are things to be avoided. So again, just briefly, did I miss a slide? I don't think so. Just briefly here, clarity. I've already talked about this. This is rule number 2, never assuming anything. It's not only just not assuming anything, but making sure that you're organized, that you're using language and vocabulary that makes it easy for your listeners to follow and understand what you're talking about. Ooh, ethics. There's my Boy Scout right there. What is ethical speaking? Is there such a thing as ethical speaking? I'm beginning to wonder. But it says being fair to different points of view. And especially when we get to the persuasive speech in particular, this is going to be very, very important in providing both sides of an argument. For example, I've had at least 1 or 2 of you email me and say that you've been in debate, which is fabulous. Anybody that's ever been in debate knows that you have to know both sides of an argument or an issue if you're going to be convincing with your particular point of view. And I don't want to belabor this. I'll come back to it when we get closer to that. But it boils down to being honest, doesn't it? Don't make up stuff. Politicians are great. Obama gave a speech some years back, and I did my own little fact checking on it. I thought, I'm going to try this out for myself. And it was a speech about the economic recovery. And I made a few notes, and then I went back and checked what he said. and everything he said was absolutely spot on as far as the numbers and so on. But he left some things out, some things that didn't support his thesis about the improvement of the economy. It wasn't blatant, it wasn't totally misleading, but is that ethical? Oh, okay, we can have this discussion a little bit further. That might be a nice talking point when we actually have a Zoom meeting. I'd like to hear your ideas on that. So a speaker should, I say, always be honest and provide fair and accurate information. And that brings me to this, plagiarism. Now, I'm not just talking about other people that give speeches. I'm talking about all of us. And you've probably encountered this issue in writing class. I'm sure all of you have taken a writing class at some point, and the instructor has said, don't steal other people's stuff. That's what plagiarism is. You take someone else's words and you use them as your own. We are made of stardust, and today I'm going to talk about our personal connection with the stars. Did I just commit plagiarism? Well, actually I did, because that's a quote, "We are made of stardust." It's from an astronomer named Carl Sagan. How hard is it for me to say instead, Carl Sagan, a great astronomer, once said, "We are made of stardust." I just corrected the plagiarism. And of course, there's also the problem of plagiarism where, and the temptation is great with the internet now, where you go in and you just lift sections right out of Wikipedia, for God's sakes. I had a speech, I can give so many examples. I had a speech once where that's exactly what the student did, and I just went and looked up the topic, and I could read the Wikipedia article they just took it from, just stole it. Absolute plagiarism. So you need to make the speech your own. You can use other people's words, but give them credit. That's the important part. Excuse me. And I'm almost afraid to use this example right now. We're in election year. Back in 2016 at the Republican National Convention, Melania Trump gave a speech, which I thought she did an excellent job. And I really feel for this woman. She's not a public figure. I don't think she wants to be a public figure. But she had to give a speech at the convention. And she obviously had some really good coaches because she had poise. She really had a sense of confidence when she was at the podium. And she had a written out speech in front of her. And she was reading it. All right. And she got to one point in the speech, and all of a sudden the Twitter universe just went bananas. And people were saying, that part of the speech is stolen word for word. Where from? Oh my God, from a speech by Michelle Obama. Well, Melania Trump didn't write that speech. They had professional speechwriters preparing these speeches for all the people up speaking. And this particular speechwriter took this section from a speech by Michelle Obama and inserted it, and never actually got in trouble for it. That's what blew my mind the most. Is that person wasn't fired, basically, because she just said, "Well, I thought it was really a good sentiment." Think about the power if in that speech Melania Trump had been, it had been written out for, had said, another woman who was, who is interested in social issues said, and her name is Michelle Obama. Think how powerful that could have been, rather than just plagiarizing it. So anyway, you get my point. Don't plagiarize. And I know, oh my God, it's so hard now. Again, with the internet, we go look up information. It's very, very difficult. One last little example. I've told you that I write, in fact, I'm a contributing editor for Astronomy Magazine, the world's best-selling magazine on astronomy. Anyway, you can run out to Barnes & Noble and buy it. But anyway, when I'm given an assignment to write on a topic, I actually avoid reading other people's articles, because stuff gets stuck in your head and it's hard to get out. And I want to avoid unintentional plagiarism. Sometimes it can be very difficult. So be careful. Don't plagiarize. So what are you going to do with your words? How are you going to present yourself? What we say, the way we say it, is what people see us as. And I hope within the next 16 weeks of this course that I will be able to help you formulate ways to become a good speaker, one that people want to listen to. All right. I will also upload this PowerPoint to the files so that you can then go back and review. It won't be with me yakking away. You'll have to follow the link to see me again. But if you just want to review the files, this PowerPoint will be there. I will do that with all my PowerPoints so you can use them for review. Thanks for listening, and let's see if I can leave this without